How we doing tonight? IB Nation Sports Talk, up and rolling. That guy's Vince D'Addario with the cool Irish breakdown sign in the background. I'm Sean Stiers with the still cool looking, but it's kind of a banner hanging on my wall.
Yeah, my flag has matriculated to my office at school, so it is hanging on the wall in my office.
All right, so you've got it as a backup, like if you ever need to do the show
That's
at
right.
school, you've got your background already.
It's there. It's ready. It's ready. Just in case something goes down, breaking news, need to make it happen, ready to go.
Very good. Very good. It is mailbag day, as it says there in your chat. So bring on the questions for tonight. Glad to have you. I see a few questions in here. You know, I always just wait now until Salty says you are on the clock, Sean. And that's when pretty much when we start the show now.
Pretty much. Yeah.
He's got my countdown clock for me in there. So how late were you guys on doing the college football playoff show last night?
It wasn't bad. It was about an hour. So till 8:30. We went on at 7:30, went till about 8:30. So it wasn't too bad.
Were you surprised at all to see Notre Dame come in at number 20?
I was pleasantly happy.
Yeah.
I want to say because I put a range out there. I was like somewhere between like 22 and 19, I think is where they should fall. And they fell at 20. And so that made me happy as far as where they ended up. I think that gives them an opportunity to get where they need to be at the end of the season. If you have your eyeballs on like a New Year's Six, for example, or something along those lines, or at least a top tier ACC bowl, then that's where you want to be. You want to have that opportunity. And I think we talked about this a little bit on last night's show. I think that the committee will overvalue Notre Dame going into the USC game if both teams continue to win, because they need to prop up a Pac-12 team to make the playoff. And a win over a potential top 12, top 11, top 10 Notre Dame would only strengthen USC's resume. So I think that's a possibility moving forward. I think Notre Dame could be the beneficiary of an inflated ranking. And then when they beat USC, that can only help them.
Yeah. And I mean, it helps Ohio State for that matter as well.
Oh, for sure.
You know, like if Ohio State needs any case strengthening at the end of the season, and if Ohio State, of course, is in the college football playoff conversation, that means they have beaten Michigan. You know, I'm talking about the end of the season after the conference championship games and all that. So it's really, you know, for them more about what seed they would potentially get if they stay undefeated and all that kind of stuff. But you're absolutely right. I think that does, you know, it strengthens others. And I'll say I was a little surprised to see 20. I thought maybe 25 through 23, considering the 3 losses, who the losses are to, and, you know, just the whole thing, everything that they've been through to get to that point. Now, granted, again, you know, it's a big win, and I'm sure that the glow of beating Clemson definitely helps them out.
Sure.
But I mean, they've throttled the top 2 teams in the ACC now at different points in the season. So, you know, I think, you know, it's good. And there are some Notre Dame connections. You know, Boo Corrigan, the chair of this whole thing. I don't know if our viewers / listeners even know it. You know, he's Gene Corrigan's son, the former Notre Dame athletic director, former ACC commissioner. He actually grew up here in South Bend. He went to your rival, South Bend St. Joseph, back in the day. And he was, you know, before he left, he was here for several years as an assistant athletic director, left here, was the athletic director at Army for a few years. And now, of course, he's the athletic director at NC State. And, you know, so he's the guy who's the chair of this committee this year.
See, I think you could make a case that Notre Dame should actually be higher based on the teams that were ranked around them. You know, if we're really breaking down the numbers, and Boo Corrigan said himself, it's about who you've beaten, not who you've lost to. Well, that only helps Notre Dame's case, right? I mean, because their wins are obviously way more impressive than who they lost to, because their losses are really, really bad. But like, for example, your rival, Kansas State, they're 0-3 versus ranked teams.
Yes.
0-3. I think Notre Dame has a case to be above
Which I
them.
love.
Hey, I know. I figured you might.
Yeah, I know. I'm surprised that Kansas State is still as high as they are, considering that. But I guess the thing for them is their losses are to ranked. It's kind of the inverse, like if Notre Dame had beaten, Marshall and Stanford, but lost to a couple of ranked teams, could they maybe even be a little bit higher right now? Because at least I don't know. Kansas State, I guess there's a case for at least a little bit steadier track that they've had. And that's probably why they're still ahead of Notre Dame right now. Or Kansas State, I'm sorry. Yeah.
There are 5 teams in the top 25 that have 2 or more wins against top 25 teams. Notre Dame is one of them.
Interesting.
So there is that. And again, you can make these numbers do whatever you want them to do. You know what I mean? I mean, it's, the teams with 2 wins over top 25 teams right now are Georgia, Ohio State, Tennessee, LSU, and Notre Dame. Now, does that mean Notre Dame should be the 5th ranked team? Of course not, right? But it does mean that they play up to their competition and that they're doing a good job against, highly ranked teams and all of that. So it's an interesting stat, right? And Notre Dame's strength of schedule is pretty darn good. And, their game control number is pretty good. So as long as Notre Dame continues to win, they're going to climb up the rankings because there's a lot of teams above them that are going to lose because they play each other.
They've got a chance to, to go from unranked to number 20, and you've still got 3 weeks left with a top 10 USC team sitting there at the end. They've got a really good chance to be a top 12 team and go to a New Year's Six Bowl when it's all said and done.
Absolutely. And I kind of mentioned this. I think I mentioned it to Brian off the air after we got done. The problem with this year is there's only one at-large bid because the Fiesta and the Peach are both semifinal games. And so you lose some of those at-large bids because all of the other bowls have tie-ins. So, for example, the Rose Bowl, Big 10 versus Pac-12. The Sugar Bowl is Big 12 versus SEC. The Orange Bowl is ACC versus either Big 10, SEC, or Notre Dame. All right, so Notre Dame has a chance to get in there, but then they would play an ACC team, which might very well be a rematch because it might be North Carolina, could be Clemson. You don't know, right? And then the Cotton Bowl is the best non-Power 5 team, which right now is Tulane, versus an at-large. That's Notre Dame's spot right now. If they get up that high, would be the Cotton Bowl against Tulane. That's not going to get too many people's juices flowing.
Yeah. I thought I'd just go ahead and throw "We Are Not Marshall's" question since we were addressing it as he was saying it. Yeah, he probably finished typing that as we were saying it. But
yes, they have a chance. It's just the problem is there's just not as many at-large bids as there normally are.
Yeah.
And so that is going to hurt them. There's no doubt about that. And I mean, if I'm being honest, you could go get your elusive New Year's Six Bowl win against Tulane or UCF or one of these non-Power 5 teams, or you go to like the Gator Bowl and play an SEC team. You know what I mean? Like, which would you rather have from a competitive standpoint? I don't know. I think that's a good rapid fire question there, Sean.
I think
which would you rather have? A lower tier game against a good SEC team or a New Year's Six game against a non-Power 5?
Yeah, exactly.
Because the non-Power 5s aren't great this year. You don't have a Cincinnati right now.
The that's true.
Is Tulane. They're playing UCF.
One of those is going to go this week. Yeah, they're both ranked. One of them's going to get knocked out.
Yeah, right. Yep. So it's going to be interesting this year, for sure.
I want to start with this one. Sean Stewart. How much will Cerberus eat against Navy? I had to double look at that word there for a minute. Tyree Estime Diggs. You like a little Greek mythology? I think that's Greek mythology, isn't it? Cerberus. So how much is that 3-headed monster going to eat against Navy this week?
I get it now. I'm there. I'm here. I think they're going to eat pretty well, to be honest with you. Now, Navy does have a pretty highly ranked rush defense. Their pass defense is putrid.
See, and I was supposed to talk to the Navy guy
Oh,
today.
okay.
Bill Wagner, he's a guy that I've talked to for probably going on 20 years now because there's only like 2 Navy guys out there.
Right.
But
Right.
he had some schedules. I'm still trying to get that hopefully tomorrow because that's the question I'm going to ask him. They're giving up only 88 rushing yards per game, but they're ranked 114th in pass defense, giving up 275 a game. So my question is, are they really that stingy with the run defense, or is it just because everyone knows they can throw against them? So most people aren't even trying, especially with today's offenses. So that's kind of what I want to. I would think that
they're still
old
going to run the
Cerberus
ball.
should be able to eat pretty good.
They're still going to run the ball effectively, right? I mean,
Yeah.
You can't really compare Navy's run defense versus like Clemson's run defense. And we all saw what happened last week. So I feel very good about Notre Dame's run offense versus Navy. I do think they are going to throw the ball a little bit more as well. I mean, whether it's to practice or whether it's to get better at it or however you want to look at it, right? I do think Notre Dame will throw the ball a little bit. They're not going to need to.
There's usually such a mismatch in athleticism
Yes.
and size with, so many of Notre Dame's receivers against Navy's defensive backs that, you can just kind of play target practice a little bit, But, so I'll be interested to see kind of how they go about that. I would think that they're going to start by just trying to pound it and see what happens. But we'll find that out Saturday afternoon. Tyler with a super chat. Do you think the College Football Playoff Committee wants USC or Oregon in?
It's a good question because I did some research today about that very fact.
Okay.
And not the problem. Here are the facts, right? Oregon, let's say that they don't lose again, right?
Right.
Then they are the Pac-12 champions. They have one loss, a blowout loss to Georgia.
To open the season.
Right, to open the season. This is a
which
long
gives
time
them,
ago.
12 wins in a row at that
That's
point.
correct. And dominating wins throughout, I would say, for the most part. And you've got wins over ranked teams of Utah, USC, UCLA, I believe, off the top of my head. Do they want them in? It's hard for me. It's hard for me. Go ahead.
Well, the composition of these committees is different from year to year. It's not like you have the same people sitting on this committee year after year.
Absolutely.
So they have history with we haven't had a Pac-12 team forever. So how much does Boo Corrigan and the rest of this crew go, well, look, it's been, what has it been at this point? 6-7 years since I think it was Washington was the last Pac-12 team that made it. Do they place a priority in trying to get essentially representation from all parts of the country? It's been so long since the Pac-12 has been in. So do they place a priority on that by going, well, it's better for the sport if we get a Pac-12 team in now and then? I don't know. I think that they're trying to get the 4 best teams. So I don't know how much that is on their radar, but it also just goes to what you're going to get from a 12-team playoff when you're getting representation. You don't have to worry about it with just selecting 4 teams.
When you just talk about USC or Oregon, the committee is going to want USC. They bring the LA market. They do all of the different things that USC Southern California.
If this is an either or situation, they would obviously rather have USC. See, I was reading it as
do they want a Pac-12
one
team
of them to represent the Pac-12, basically? Do they want whoever the Pac-12 champion?
Because I think at the end of the day, I think we can all agree that we probably see Oregon as the Pac-12 champion. That's where I'm at, okay?
Right. I would lean that direction.
And that means USC has 3 losses. So they're not going to be part of the conversation. It will be Oregon.
Now, are you counting on Notre Dame beating USC when 100%. You say 3 losses? Okay.
Yes, because they already have a loss to Utah. They would lose to Notre Dame, and then they would lose in the Pac-12 championship to Oregon.
But I like how you're just writing that off already. That's a given. Well, they'd have 3 losses because
they'd have 3. So they're not even part of the equation. So now you're talking about a 1-loss Oregon team.
Yeah.
Again, if the committee has its choice, they definitely want They want a 1-loss USC team over a 1-loss Oregon team. And obviously they would play each other in the Pac-12 championship. So, yeah. And I think a one-loss USC team gets in.
Really?
I do.
That's interesting.
Because
I
their
haven't
loss,
looked. Yeah,
their loss is not even close to as bad as some of the other losses that would be out there with teams that they would be competing against. So,
but the other part of that is they would have basically what 1.5 quality wins, something like that. You know, they wouldn't have that many.
they would have a quality win over UCLA.
I haven't looked. I
They would
haven't
have a
looked
quality
at
win
it.
over UCLA. They would have a quality win over Notre Dame.
That's true. That's
and
true.
That's true. And they would have a quality win over Oregon.
I forgot about
They'd have
UCLA.
3.
I mean, they've still got to play. I mean, that's
they might have 4 losses when it's all said and done.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
if they can run the table, right, they'll have quality wins under their belt for sure.
True. Gavin wants to know if we think Drew Pine's accuracy and confidence issues stem from not being able to see over his line. He seems to be better outside the pocket.
I would say that is way overrated as far as an issue for Drew Pine. I don't think that has anything to do with anything. Yes, do they knock some passes down? Yeah, that has something to do with it. Obviously, that hurts his completion percentage. Okay. It has nothing to do with his confidence level, has nothing to do with his accuracy when balls get past the offensive line, the defensive line, and they aren't anywhere near the receiver.
Yeah, I was going to say there are too many times when he has clean looks at the receiver, you know, whether he's throwing out to the flat or wherever it happens to be, where he just throws the ball on the ground. You know, He just looks to his left and throws the ball on the ground, or throws it over somebody's head, or he even has a clean pocket and, you know, he overthrows somebody downfield. So, yeah, I mean, the fact that he, you know, is a little bit shorter and, you know, he's getting these balls batted down, that's an issue. And Marcus Freeman said earlier this week, he's got to clean that up. There are different things that he can do, movement in the pocket, you know, to figure that out. I think that's his biggest issue, being short. You know, it's just the fact that guys are sticking their arm, you know, they're smartly sticking their arm up at the line of scrimmage and batting his passes down. I think that's the biggest thing. I don't know. I don't know. We're just seeing an erratic quarterback.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. I mean,
that's
yes, he's getting balls knocked down, but I don't think that has anything to do with his confidence.
Right.
If he got balls knocked down.
I think his confidence is because he doesn't make some of those easy plays early on, and then it starts playing with his head a little bit because he can be an emotional guy, as we've talked about.
Right.
Okay. Speaking of which, Milton fan, I know DP is no Joe Montana, but he does have one loss. Led team to victories over 3 ranked teams and takes shot after shot and doesn't stop. Do you think he deserves a little bit more credit? I do think he deserves a little bit more credit. And I've talked about this before. You know, if you're going to play for Notre Dame, obviously there's a level that you have to perform at. But at the same time, this was not a highly recruited guy. He was offered a scholarship by Notre Dame. He accepted the scholarship. He does work hard. You know, he's worked hard for the last 3 years to get to the point that he's at. And it's not from lack of effort. It's just that his talent level, you know, isn't. I'm just being honest. I'm being pragmatic about this. His talent level just isn't what you expect of the starting quarterback at Notre Dame. So I can't hold that against him. He's doing everything that he can, you know, to the best he can.
Agreed.
There's some things that he needs to clean up, but yeah, I don't hold it against him. And, you know, like, I think some of that has to be factored in when we're talking about, you know, Tommy Rees and Marcus Freeman and all that whole stuff. At the end of the day, they've put together the season they've put together with the backup quarterback for all but 2 games. Now, as people have properly pointed out, Tommy Rees is the guy who recruited him. And as we've talked about, there needs to be an uptick in quarterback recruiting. But I don't hold it against Drew Pine. Drew Pine's doing everything to the best of his ability, I think. So
I think there's still some room for improvement from Drew Pine. I will say that.
And I'm not saying.
Yeah. And I think that his ability level can get him there, right? Like we've said a bunch of times, I don't think.
Because we've already seen it at that level.
Drew Pine is not the Drew Pine we saw against North Carolina.
Right.
That's not who he's going to be consistently, right? but he's also, I don't think, the same guy that has played the last 3 games either. So there's a happy medium in there someplace that I think he needs to get to. Now, I think he undeservedly so gets a heck of a lot of crap from people, right? And so I think from an overall standpoint, he deserves more credit. I think I've given him the proper amount of credit, right? I do. I've praised him when he's done really well. We've picked out when he hasn't done well.
We have too. I mean, we jumped all in on the Drew Pine hype wagon there for 3 weeks.
And
right.
I would also say that I would not use the word he led the team to victories. He was a part of those victories, but I don't think you can say he was leading the team in those victories. That's the only part I would push back on in this particular question. You know, it's like Brian Kelly said when Notre Dame went to the national championship in 2012 and Everett Golson was the quarterback. He wasn't driving the bus. He had a nice comfy seat on the bus.
Right.
He wasn't driving the bus. Drew Pine's not driving the bus. Okay. That offensive line is driving the bus. And, you know, and we can talk about other things as well. But Drew Pine's doing what Drew Pine, and that's why he got the game ball, right? He's getting credit. He got the game ball, the offensive game ball, because he didn't turn the ball over. He had some gutsy runs. He had a nice pass to Michael Mayer for the nail in the coffin. He did what he was asked to do, and they won the game.
And without saying he was a game manager, Marcus Freeman basically said he was a game manager because he talked about changing protections and all that.
Sure.
But that's something that gets taken for granted as well, is the ability. Because, like, one thing that we've seen Drew Pine throw some interceptions, obviously, but we still haven't seen him just make, like, the dumbest looking play that, like, again, someone of his skill level you might expect to see. But again, it's because the kid is in the film room all the time. You know, like, he's grinding film all the time and trying to compensate for the fact, you know, like people like to talk about, well, he's got a noodle arm and those kind of things. No, he doesn't have a rocket arm. He can't get it downfield like that. But he's trying to use what's between his ears to help make up for the fact that he doesn't, you know, quite have that same, you know, that skill level. And I think that has been a big factor, because what I was going to say is, like, we haven't seen him make that just confounding, completely stupid, you know, like taking a dumb sack, you know, getting strip sacked, you know, because he's standing in the pocket too long, doing those kind of things. He's generally making smart plays.
Absolutely.
It's just the consistency and the accuracy that he needs to continue to work on.
Absolutely. And no one, and on this channel at least, has ever questioned his moxie or his toughness or any of that. I mean, the kid's tough as nails. I mean, he's proven that week in and week out, and no one will ever question that.
No, not at all. Antoine, Notre Dame beats 5 top 25 teams with 2 who were in the top 5. Orange and Cotton, if Notre Dame is 9-3, won't take another team who hasn't beat 2 top.
They don't really have a choice. That's the issue here, right? They are contractually locked in
with the conference affiliations.
Certain teams. I mean, that's just the way it is. Now, could the College Football Playoff Committee maybe change the rules? Maybe. But, like, in the rules, it says, for example, the Orange Bowl is ACC versus Big Ten, SEC, or Notre Dame. Notre Dame cannot take the ACC spot in the Orange Bowl. That is in the contract.
Right.
Cannot.
Right.
They can take the other side, but then that gives you a game that they probably have already played. They're not going to do that. They're not going to have North Carolina, Notre Dame, the rematch. Like, that's never going to happen. So,
I mean, it could. It's not completely out of the realm of possibility.
But I doubt it. I just doubt it.
Because, like, if like if it comes to Notre Dame or TCU against, Clemson or North Carolina, who would you rather have?
Right. Well, and
if Notre Dame is ranked higher, and I think that's what it would take, then they could conceivably do that.
Because you are talking in that game, okay? The winner of the SEC, I think we can all assume, is probably going to be in the top 4, right? And possibly a second SEC team. So the third SEC team would be the team that they would take in the Orange Bowl, right? There's no chance that they're going to take the third Big Ten team. There's no No chance of that
Right.
happening, in my opinion.
Right.
Okay. Because there's
Exactly.
2 good Big Ten teams, and then there's everybody else. You can say what you want to about Penn State being ranked like 14th or 15th. They're not taking Penn State in the Orange Bowl. Okay. So you're talking the Big Ten is out. The SEC, you're looking at probably maybe even LSU potentially in that spot. I mean, like, you have options in that spot from the SEC or Notre Dame. It's possible. It's definitely possible, but I don't think it's likely.
I agree. Shannon wants to know if there was ever a point in the game Saturday where we felt Clemson was going to stage a comeback and stymie the Irish. I think Benjamin Morrison pick 6 sealed the deal. What do you think, Vince?
Was there ever a point in the game on Saturday where you felt Clemson?
I'll just say this,
no.
and
The answer
I've
is
said
no
this
for me.
I was still uncomfortable when it was 21-0 because Notre Dame had not, they still weren't finishing offensive drives. And so when it was 21-0, I still felt uneasy. But as I'm writing my story after the Morrison pick 6, and this is, it makes it 28-0, but I remember writing, something to the effect of, Notre Dame, like they finished it off. Basically, they put the game away with that pick 6, and that was still plenty of time to go in the game because Clemson scored 2 touchdowns after that. Notre Dame still scored 1. That was still relatively early in the fourth quarter, I think. So I just felt uneasy,
That's fair.
But again, it was mostly like PTSD type stuff because we haven't seen. Jesse and I think we're talking about this yesterday. We haven't seen Notre Dame go for those kill shots where they were completely willing to put a team away, like keep on stepping on the throat and just put the game away. Marcus Freeman, I think that was really big for Marcus Freeman. Like when we talk about Marcus Freeman as a head coach, his willingness and want to do that, to completely leave no doubt and not downshift and just say, well, we've got the lead now. Let's change what we're doing. So
right.
That's what I felt like when it was 21-0. I had just enough uneasiness still.
I know this is going to sound super homerish, but as soon as Notre Dame returned that block kick for a touchdown, I never felt uneasy. I just didn't. I just felt watching the first 2 series and then Notre Dame scoring on a special teams play. I never felt uneasy. And to your point, Sean, when it was 21-0, old Clemson teams, I would have felt uneasy. Clemson had done nothing offensively to make me think that they could score 3 touchdowns at that point.
No, I mean, you're right, but Clemson had also, Notre Dame had 5 punt blocks going into that game. Clemson had 4 block kicks going into that game. So, like, that was also in the back of my mind, like, well, again, Notre Dame's not finishing drives. Yeah. And this is also a good, the team you're playing is also good at blocking kicks. So, like, one of those plays could have easily swung some momentum, but obviously Clemson was never able to come up with that.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
Right. Interesting question from Salty. True or false?
Ooh,
this past weekend will be seen as the moment when yesterday's dynasties announced their decline. Bama and Clemson, and Notre Dame's dynasty announced its rise.
I think it's a possibility. Right? I think it's a possibility. But that's going on. That's going way out there. And I don't even think that we would be able to definitively say that yes or no for like a year or 2. Like you could look back and be like, you know what? There it was. It was that weekend that things started to go the other way.
Right.
For both of those. I would love for that to be the case. I always am a fan of new blood at the top, as long as Notre Dame's always there. But man, it's possible.
Well, so, I know we were talking yesterday about the comments that Paul Feinbaum had about, this is the beginning of the end for Nick Saban and Alabama and all this. Well, he's still recruiting. He's still pulling in pretty nice recruiting classes.
Yeah.
So is Clemson. Maybe not quite at at that same level, but they're still getting them as well. And really, the only thing that's kind of changing that dynamic is now you've got Marcus Freeman in here, who is starting to recruit at this elite level. Texas A&M, whatever you want to say about them, with all the craziness, like they got the big recruiting class this year, and I think it was like 4 players in that in the freshman class, part of the big NIL group, got suspended and all that. But obviously Georgia's, so like other schools are obviously starting to pull the elite talent in some other directions. So maybe that's kind of, brought Alabama and Clemson down a little bit. I think we're seeing it a little bit more with Clemson, obviously, than Alabama. Because like I said yesterday, Alabama lost to Tennessee on a missed field goal at the end of the game. They lost to LSU on an extra point in overtime. So it's not like they're getting dominated in these games.
Right.
They were right down to the wire. They're a couple plays away from being undefeated potentially still. So I agree with you. I mean, I think that is I don't think I'm quite willing to go that far just yet. That's a year or two down the road before we can really say that.
And it's like a look back situation. It's like, okay, where did the decline start? Can we pinpoint the beginning? It could be this weekend.
Yeah.
I mean, that would be awesome that Notre Dame would be a part of that kind of a thing. And obviously a part of their own ascension, right? It's possible.
Right. Larry wants to know if there's any chance Brandon Joseph comes back next year.
I think that there is a chance. I don't know. Like, this would be a great question for Ryan as far as what his draft stock is currently. I don't think he's had the not breakout, but like the All-America season that he was hoping to have when he came over from Northwestern. I think we all hoped that he would be better than he is. Now, that's saying a lot because I think he's been very solid for this team, but he's not been an All-American. He hasn't been Kyle Hamilton, right? And I think that if he comes back for another year, he might be able to cement himself and do better in the draft moving forward. I think it would benefit him. Now, will he take that opportunity, or was this just a one and done situation in his mind when he came here and that you can't get him off of that? But I think there's a case to be made for him to come back.
He said when he came in the door, he wanted to be like Kyle Hamilton and be a first-round draft pick.
That's not going to happen, I don't
So
think.
if that's really his goal, that he, to come here to become a first-round draft pick, he's still got some work to do. I'll be curious to see, and you can only, I think, they can only put in so many names for the draft evaluations and stuff like that. But I would be curious, like if they, if they put his name in, what that because basically I think it's like first round and then, like second, third, like is the next grade, and then the next one is basically
go back to
return to school.
Yeah, go back to school. You suck. No.
Yeah.
But yeah.
And then the question becomes, do you want to risk injury versus if you've got some kind of grade that says you're going to be able to play in the NFL next year, just take your paycheck and see what happens.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, and
I'd call it 50-50 maybe now. Really, it's just dependent on how highly he values actually, the chance to be a first round draft pick.
Is that like, do you need that next to your name, or can you go get a contract, play your contract, and then play for your second contract, which is where all rookies, I mean, that's where you make your money, is in your second contract. I mean, because
there's obviously more guaranteed money in that first round pick than there is being a third round pick. Thomas, do you think Pine will have 25 or more pass attempts?
If they have to have 25 pass attempts against Navy, I don't think that's a good sign, if I'm being honest with you. I will say under. I don't think he'll have that. And if he does, I don't think they're playing a very good game offensively.
Yeah, I know. No, I think you're exactly right about that, because like when you look at Saturday's game, if Drew Pine can go 9 of 17 and they are able to beat Clemson, I don't see the formula changing when you're playing Navy. I think that they're going to try to stick with that same formula against Navy. There's no reason to come off that at this point. I don't see them throwing the ball all over the place.
Yeah, there'll be some play action, things of that nature, which is fine. But yeah, if they're what though,
if I'm going to nitpick last Saturday, and we haven't done a whole lot of nitpicking,
do it.
Really, I was shocked at the way they were running the ball, and there were still, again, when you're running the ball like that, there were too many times they weren't even using play action to try to set Drew Pine up when he did make those 17 pass attempts. It's like when you're dominating on the ground like that, why aren't you showing a play fake? Just, I mean, again, that's a nitpick, but I think it's valid, especially if you get into a game that is more competitive than that, which you would expect that you would have at some point.
Right. And we've got some comments in here. The pass game is Navy's weakness. Brian said Navy has a good run defense on paper. Yeah, they do. Look who they play. I mean, I'm sorry if Notre Dame can't run the ball against Navy, then they've got bigger issues. So
right. Again, they give up 88 yards a game on the ground, 275 through the air.
Is really bad.
Are those numbers that skewed because they're really that good against the run, or are they just that weak through the air? And that's the question that I want to ask the Navy reporter when I get him. Hopefully, if I get him on tomorrow. So that's I know. Because you can look at a stat sheet and see that,
right?
And it's like, ooh, 88 yards a game, but I mean, that's about what Clemson was giving up too. So
exactly, and Notre Dame put 260 something on them. So
yeah,
I don't care that that's what they have. I don't care.
Anthony wants to know if the potential draftees sit for the bowl game.
Depends on the bowl game. Depends on the kid, because there are numerous amounts of draft eligible players that could very well leave. Obviously, Michael Mayer leading the pack there, and Isaiah Foskey. I think I said this in one of the games, one of the shows earlier this week about Michael Mayer. Everybody around him is going to tell him to sit, and it wouldn't surprise me if he played. Like that's how I feel about Michael Mayer. I could be dead wrong on this, but we had 2 sit out, and it was a New Year's Six game last year. You had Kyle Hamilton, who I totally understand. You had Kyron Williams, which I don't understand as much. So if you are a guaranteed lock for the first round, peace be with you. I get why you're going to sit. Notre Dame, do they have a lock in the first round right now? Foskey, I think I've seen it in some mocks. Michael Mayer, obviously. Other than that, I would say they should all play. But, yeah.
No, I mean, I can't disagree. Should they play? Sure. Will they play? I think every year it's going to be, unless you're in the college football playoff, I think every year, every team is going to be, do they play? Do they sit? Do they play? All that kind of stuff. I think the only thing that makes it interesting with Michael Mayer is this is a guy for, like as big as he is, he's kind of dinged up, like there are I think like minor things that we don't know about all the time. Like, last year he had the groin injury and he played through my point is like, he plays through all that kind of stuff. Is he willing to do that though? If you're playing in a middle tier bowl or whatever bowl not for the national championship with his draft status on the line.
Right.
That'll be the question, I think.
Speaking of draft status, I sent a text to Ryan, and he said that Brandon Joseph is a mid-rounder right now.
Okay.
So there you go.
All right.
Mid-rounder. So, and he also said he has a very interesting decision to make. So he's right there with us.
For sure. I think Ryan might be a guy we need to have on once we get into January and February, and March we start doing a little draft talk. Kind of
absolutely. That's his deal, man.
I know.
That's his thing. That's how he came onto the scene.
Brent wants to know how many passing yards Drew Pine will have versus Navy. You know what, Brent? I'll just go just for you out there in Monterey. I'll go 101 for Highway 101. Runs right there.
Look at you.
That's right.
175. 175.
Man, you think he's going to just throw it all over the place? Huh?
Well, I don't know if 175 is throwing it all over the place. But...
Well, compared to last week, again, when you don't even throw for 100 yards against Clemson.
Well, I think there's going to be some passes forced into Michael Mayer because there isn't a midi out there that can cover Michael Mayer. That's for darn sure.
That's true, too.
And I also think that some of these wide receivers are going to get loose because there isn't a midi out there that can cover Tobias Merriweather or Deion Colsey. And so I think he'll get yards, and I think there'll be some yards after catch, as Stymie says. And I'll say I'll set it at 174.5, and I'll take the over.
That's your over/under, huh? You're going over. All right. All right.
I think I can get good odds at that number.
I think you could. Michael wants to know how good this offense could be with a quarterback that could be around 65% in the passing game? And would this offense be top 10, 20 with the run game? I mean, I think we said last week, Drew Pine doesn't need to be the 72% passer, but he can't be a sub 50% passer, like to compete against a legitimate, well, again, like throw out what I was about to say because they just beat down Clemson without
know,
him.
right?
You know, they were, I guess, 9 of 17.
But it's
That's
almost an
still a little better
anomaly.
than 50%.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, and that's my point. 65%, that's all you need from this guy. He just has to be able
And that's
to
who
hit
we thought
those
Drew Pine
passes.
was.
Yeah.
Honestly. That mid-60s.
He was soaring better than that for a while.
Right. That's who he was. That's who I see him as. Mid-60s, hitting your layups, taking shots downfield. That's Drew Pine. Right? But he needs to hit the layups, and he's not hitting the layups. And that's the problem.
Yep. Too many times when he's got those shots and he's just not able to connect on them.
Right.
Too many times. That's what it comes down to. Do you feel confident at all talking about the commitment today?
Well, I can talk about it in the macro.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So here's a couple. Salty, fill in the blank. Carson Hobbs' commitment is blank. And then he says, with Hobbs in the 2023 class, are there any remaining gaps in personnel for the secondary? So that's about as macro, I think, as
yes. And those are perfect questions that I can answer both of those. I think the fill in the blank, I would say the beginning of a run. I think there's going to be a nice little recruiting run here after the Clemson game, right? And this is the first one that was an absolute direct result of this past weekend. He decommitted yesterday. He commits today. Like boom, boom, bada boom, boom, right? So I think that's going to be the beginning of a little bit of a run here. And then as far as the secondary in general, you add Hobbs, who is a 24, to the 23 class. I will go with what I read from Brian Driscoll today on irishbreakdown.com about this young man and his impact on the team, in that they have three, as long as they sign everybody that's in the 23 class, they have three classes, 21, 22, 23, where they have added a boatload of depth and talent. Now they can be selective. Yeah. And they took Hobbs, they took his commitment now when they didn't need to take his commitment now. That tells me that Mike Mickens is very high on him. And it also tells me that while they can be very selective because of the depth that they've built, that they got this kid. Like that speaks volumes to me, to be honest with you. So the secondary is doing just fine, specifically at corner.
Yeah, I mean, I don't. Neither one of us follows recruiting that closely, right. So my knowledge is basically around what yours is. All I can say is, Benjamin Morrison this year, and the haul that they're going to bring in next year, and adding this commitment. That secondary, it's been so questionable for years and years and years here. But I think we said this, like Saturday was the first time that Notre Dame had definitively better talent in its secondary than the opposing receivers of, like a Clemson or Alabama or those kind of teams that they've played.
Yeah.
And they did well against Ohio State and, as well. They did really well. So I think the future for this program is just looking really good with what they're getting in that recruiting in that secondary right now.
Absolutely.
All right. I want to get a couple more here before we get into rapid fire. There's a couple that I saw that kind of play into some stuff that we've got in rapid fire. And Scott was asking this. We were talking bowls earlier. Any scenario at all where we could be matched up with LSU in a bowl game?
There's a scenario. Yes.
And I actually saw a specific one today.
Okay.
Stuart, and I took a screenshot of it that Stuart Mandel had at the Athletic.
I believe it's the Gator Bowl, but I don't want to steal your thunder.
And here. I think that there's a chance there, but like for where LSU is right now in terms of like they keep winning. Like if they had lost, maybe to Alabama, I think the Gator Bowl probably would have been in play. But here's what he said. Okay. For reasons I can't explain other than that's in a contract, the ACC would take the Big Ten spot in the ReliaQuest Bowl, which is formerly the Outback Bowl. in Tampa against the SEC. LSU would need to slip past the Citrus Bowl and land there, but Notre Dame is eligible for any ACC bowl and could be the Tigers' opponent. So the ReliaQuest Bowl is a distinct. But now that relies on LSU losing at least a game and Notre Dame winning out probably and that kind of stuff.
Because there's only 2 bowls that pair up an ACC with an SEC. It's the ReliaQuest Bowl that you mentioned and the Gator Bowl. That's it. Right. And those are both considered first-tier bowls for the ACC.
Right.
So, yeah, that's absolutely possible. There's just Notre Dame needs to be within 1 win of an ACC team that would fall into that bowl, and then they can steal that spot. Yeah.
Which makes ACC people happy, of course.
I'm sure it does. But luckily, the ACC, once you get past a couple, then sorry.
Yeah.
No.
Father David Penny, dream bowl matchup this year for Notre Dame. Do you have a dream bowl matchup? Is it LSU? Like,
you just said
want to see it?
There's part of me that does, and there's part of me that wants
no part of that circus.
I know, exactly. It's dream matchup. I have 3 dream matchups. 1, LSU, and this isn't in any order. 1 is LSU, 2 is Michigan.
Right.
I'd love to play Michigan. And the third one would be just somebody they've never played before. Like I do like that. I like when Notre Dame plays a team that they haven't played. I do not want that team to be Tulane. I want that team to be a Power 5 team.
Right.
Like
Ole Miss. Ole Miss.
Yes.
Bring on the Kiffins.
I think that would be fun. You want to talk about a circus? That would be a circus, my friend. But I think that would be.
It wouldn't be the same kind of circus as all the buildup with Brian Kelly. 1 year removed from Notre Dame.
That would be a different kind of circus, but a circus nonetheless.
Yeah. I guess you could see if he slipped out of town before the bowl game came around or whatever. Salty, true or false? The Clemson game is the game in which Colsey, Thomas, and Merriweather were promoted from spot players to mainstays in the
on-field.
Okay. Yeah.
Yes, true.
Wide receiver unit.
I mean,
those
are the 3 wide receivers that we saw predominantly in the game. I mean, Lorenzo Styles had 11 snaps. I don't know what the snap count was for Braden Lenzy, but it wasn't that many, right? These are the 3 guys that played the majority of the snaps, and that was one of the things that we talked about. I was super happy about. They got the guys on the field that deserve to be on the field right now. And as much as I like Lorenzo Styles as a player, he's not playing well. He doesn't belong on the field. These 3 guys do. So I'm cool with it.
Yeah. And I think that we're at the point in the season now where you would expect to see maybe kind of a changing of the guard when you talk about got to do it. Like Colsey has finally arrived these last couple of games. And that's good because he's a guy that was being depended upon. And I know we didn't talk about it yesterday, but Joe Wilkins deciding to leave the program, there's like one more body that's gone. So there's only so many bodies that are going to get it. Obviously, Joe Wilkins was feeling like must have been frustrated since all of a sudden Colsey is appearing and Merriweather is out there more, and you still don't see any Joe Wilkins. But that seems to be it. And we've seen less of Braden Lenzy over the last couple of weeks, so it does appear that way.
Yeah. And let's see if it continues.
Yeah. Now
let's hope that it wasn't, let's hope that it wasn't just a one gamer, right? But I hope not.
Right. Salty wants to know A, B, or C. Did Vince do best in AP English, AP History, AP Greek Mythology? Answer: it's a false choice, as Vince did not take any AP classes.
First of all, that's harsh. Second of all, I will say I did not take any AP classes because they did not exist at my school.
As if that was the reason why.
I'm just saying there was no AP classes at my school. I took
That's
honors
a good call,
classes.
though. I can always fall back on that as well.
Yeah.
No, I didn't take any AP classes.
Oh, I didn't. I took honors classes though. So
I did not.
That's all they had back then. Back in the Stone Age of going to high school in the 90s.
Right. All right, Vince. Well, we've got a lot of questions. As John said,
all of a sudden
the above.
Yeah, well.
We've run through several. Do you want to
Yes.
hit some more? Are you ready for rapid fire?
Let's go rapid fire, baby,
Let's do
because
it.
I'm kind of pumped about this rapid fire this week.
All right.
And I hope I didn't just get stuck on one question the whole time, but
I know. There's at least one that we're going to get stuck on, though, I think. Double fill in the blank on this first one. You felt blank about Marcus Freeman as a head coach a month ago, and you feel blank about him as a head coach today.
I felt somewhat uneasy about Marcus Freeman as a head coach a month ago, and I feel solid as the Rock of Gibraltar about him as a head coach today.
Okay. Solid as the rocket. Is that what you're going to leave it at? You're not going to expand upon that at all?
Yeah, sure, I'll explain it. So yes, did I expect some valleys, obviously, this season with him being a first-year head coach? Of course. But I figured those valleys would come in wins against Stanford and Marshall. Like
Right.
I didn't feel like the valleys would be deep enough that we would be discussing losses, right? I thought we would be discussing wins, and then here's the things that they can work on, et cetera, right? I feel really good about it right now because he has changed a lot of the things that he was doing in the first place. He is really, really good at self-reflection. He's really, really good at it.
Mm-hmm.
And we saw bits and pieces of it when he was the defensive coordinator after the Florida State game, et cetera. And a lot more of that stuff happened behind the scenes than we're aware of as a general public because he was the defensive coordinator, not the head coach, right? But we have seen him grow into this head coaching role by leaps and bounds over 9 games. I mean, leaps and bounds. And I would say, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic here, but he has grown so much in 9 games. You don't see that from first-time head coaches, maybe over 2 or 3 years. And I feel like he's changed in 9 games. And so that makes me very excited about the present and the future of Marcus Freeman leading this program, because I think he will continue to be self-reflective and change in a way that is not knee-jerk, but in a way that is going to help the program and move it forward and all of those things. So
yeah.
I'm very confident right now.
If it needs addressing, he'll address it. And to his credit, as you said, just like it's been such a steep, growth line, I guess, for, because like I felt very unsure about his future as a head coach after that Stanford game. That's when a month ago was. It's like, it's one thing to be a people person and a great recruiter and all that stuff, but seeing that loss to that Stanford team that had lost 11 straight games to Power 5 teams, and the game plan they had for that game, and just what seemed like a lack of focus and a lack of discipline, and and basically like the outward appearance of a lack of proper preparation. It's like all those things, just all these red flags and alarm bells going off after that. That was the first time I really questioned whether or not he was a head coach, I think, because again, growing pains and all that, you can live with some stuff, but then they looked a little bit better against UNLV. They won a lopsided game. Could have been more lopsided, if a few things were cleaned up, So again, it's like things to clean up, all that stuff. Then you go to Syracuse, though, and you see a team that looked much more sharp already, and beat another good football team. And then, of course, we get last week. And, so as of today, I'm just much more confident in him as a head coach because, as you were alluding to, we really seem to see him taking strides and growing as a head coach from week to week. And you're absolutely right. It's like most young coaches like this, it's like it would take like a year or 2 years. And then all of a sudden you start to see some of these things evaporate. But now we've seen it in a matter of weeks, drastic improvement in a matter of weeks. So I feel much more confident now. Now, all that said, though, I'm much more confident and encouraged about his future here. But this is really an important week. And I think Brian has said this week as well, because, again, the split that we have now in the season is 4-1 against ranked teams, 2-2 against unranked. This is the, going back to UNLV and Stanford back to back. This is the first unranked team you've played now. Are you only going to get up for the good teams? Or are you going to go out? Or are you going to play, a full 60 minutes against an unranked team as well, and leave no doubt who the better team is at the end of the day? So that's
that's still, a little bit of a
Absolutely.
question. We're kind of riding that, we're riding the Clemson high for sure right now, but I
Yeah.
sure feel better. And I want to still be able to feel that way after Navy Saturday.
Absolutely. That is still a major question mark for me, and I feel like even if they don't perform where I need them to be, I think they'll get to that point. Like, I have faith that Marcus Freeman will get them there, right? If they're not there right now, but it's still a major question mark for where they're at as a program.
Yeah. And that's kind of, like I said, I was saving this. Jeff Brown was saying, are you confident? How confident are we that after the Clemson win, Notre Dame is truly on the right track and we're not going to see any issues with Navy and Boston College that we saw earlier with Marshall and Stanford? And that plays into this next question as well. Which has the better chance to happen? Notre Dame loses to either Navy or Boston College, or they beat USC. I know what your answer is going to be, but go ahead.
This one's tough, though. I mean, I will say that this one is tough because I don't. The better chance to happen is that they beat USC. I think, if I'm reading the question correctly, right? Isn't that how? But I mean, they're not going to lose. They're not going to lose to Navy or Boston College, so I don't think that's going to happen. So I think the more likely thing is,
how confident are you in that statement, though? Are you making that statement solely because they just beat the number 4 team in the country?
Oh, that's definitely part of it.
Without, while disregarding the losses to Marshall, and again, it goes to how confident are we that that crap is really behind them, or do they play down to the level of their competition?
I am confident that they are going to win those games and beat you. I'm confident they're going to win out, right? Would it surprise me if they lost to either one? Yeah, not as much as you might think. That's part
like
of the
Stymie
problem.
says, both are very plausible.
Yes, I know. And so I think they beat all 3. I'm more confident now than I was, obviously, before the Clemson game. But I keep reminding myself, man, dude, they lost to Marshall and Stanford. You can't forget that. And that is a reality. That is the reality that we are both living in right now. So it's very difficult for me. But my confidence level is still high that they would beat all 3 of those teams. Like, I would put my hard-earned money down to say that they go 3-0 to finish the season. Not a lot of it, but some of it.
I don't know that I'm willing still to put hard-earned money on anything regarding
like
a Notre Dame
$5,
wager this season.
Okay?
Okay.
I'm not talking about
your hard-earned $5
paycheck. Right. I'm not talking about that. That's how I bet, Sean. I bet $5, $10 at a time.
It's like 2 Reese's peanut butter cups in today's economy. So
I know, right? Seriously.
I am mostly confident that the win over USC, like that, basically that they'll beat. I'm more confident that they will beat USC than I have any, doubts about Navy and or question.
Yeah.
I think they should be able to take, I just keep looking at, if you can run that game plan last week against Clemson, you should be able to do that against anybody.
Yes.
But like, here's my question too, because, like, I know you guys, especially over the weekend on the shows, talked about how Tommy Rees went against, his tendencies.
Right.
So they basically completely got caught Clemson off guard. Yeah. So now that that's on film, are these next 2 teams going to be more prepared for whatever they threw at them?
They can try to be more prepared, but I don't think it's going to matter.
It shouldn't matter. It shouldn't matter against
all 3 defenses. Shouldn't matter, specifically Southern Cal. Like, their defense is a sieve. I mean,
a soft sieve.
Woof. I mean, it's just not good. Now,
there's such thing as a soft sieve.
You can be nervous about what the USC offense is, and that's totally legit. But after seeing the way that Benjamin Morrison played and like this defense played against Clemson, I feel more confident about that matchup. But I always thought that Notre Dame, even with the offensive struggles, scoring points that they've had, I've always thought that they could score against USC. Their defense is that bad to me. So
I came home last week and I was watching a little bit before I fell asleep. I was watching USC play Cal, and freaking Cal was scoring left and right.
I mean, their quarterback had over 400 yards passing, and they scored 35 points. Cal, okay?
Yeah.
So if they can do that, and I realize the transitive property is not always appropriate in college football, But if they can do that, there's no reason that Notre Dame shouldn't be able to be successful.
Yeah.
I'm not saying Drew Pine's going to throw for over 400. Okay. But there's no reason they shouldn't be successful. I would go as far as to be cocky and say, here's our defensive playbook. I mean, here's our offensive playbook. Stop us. And I don't think they could do it.
I had to write down a future rapid fire question when you said something there. So
well played, sir. You're always thinking.
Always have to. Yeah. When they come to my mind, I can't let them get away. So, steel trap, right?
Right. Exactly.
Okay. Next question. Do you buy or sell that Notre Dame and Clemson should play more often?
I buy it. And here's my reasoning why. Number one, Clemson's a really, really good program. And I think they have, and regardless of what people think about Dabo Swinney, I am a fan of Dabo Swinney. I think he runs a good program. And well, they might be going this way.
Yeah.
They're still going to be an upper echelon team in the ACC. And they're still going to be competitive, and they can still beat you at any time. So I would replace, Stanford in a heartbeat with Clemson. In a heartbeat with Clemson. I would love for that to just a flat out A for B, boom, replacement. I think that would be fun to have.
Vince's disdain for playing Stanford is is noted on this show. It is a high level. That's right. That they've been doing this ACC scheduling agreement since 2014, which makes this the 9th season that of Notre Dame playing this ACC arrangement. They've only played 5 times in those 9 years, and remember, one of them was the ACC championship game, which is a one-off thing. It's never going to happen again, and the other was the college football playoff. So in 9 seasons, they've only played 3 times in the regular season, and so I think you can at least move that to every other year, so that you've got 4 years of eligibility. Obviously you can play 5, up to 5, but typical 4 years of eligibility. So like if a kid is in school 4 years, you're going to get to host Clemson once. You're going to get to go to Clemson once. They've only been to Clemson once in the 9 years, which is amazing. And that's been 7 years. Yeah.
But I agree with you. I think that'd be great. Even if they did a home and away, like back to back, took 2 years off,
right?
Then they go back.
Whatever.
You know what I mean? That's the same amount of time.
I just think that if Notre Dame and the ACC are going to keep this arrangement, it makes sense for the best team in the ACC to be playing a team like Notre Dame, who you've got this arrangement with more often. It's good for everybody. Like when you start talking college football playoff and just general excitement, look at the attention that game got the other night. Like if LSU Alabama wouldn't have been going on the other night,
right?
Notre Dame Clemson would have gotten even more attention Saturday night.
One, it would have helped if Notre Dame hadn't lost to Marshall and
no, that's true too. That's true too.
But your point is well taken. I mean, that they should be playing Clemson more often as opposed to playing North Carolina like every year. It seems like they play Pitt all the time. There's teams in the ACC that it just feels like Notre Dame plays all the time, and the balance is not there. The balance is not there.
Yeah, I agree. John says Notre Dame should play Michigan every year, and I think it's like what is it? Is it an 8 or a 9 team schedule that they play? I can't even remember like the ACC off the top. I mean, yeah, it's 8 teams. They play an 8-game schedule. So it's like I don't know. I'm just saying it just makes it would make sense, I think, for everybody if Notre Dame and Clemson were playing more often, because Notre Dame needs more of these, premier type games, basically. So
well, and I do want to pick this one up because picked the wrong week to quit sniffing glue. That's the name of the person. So just want to put that out there.
That's from Airplane. That's an Airplane reference.
Yeah,
I think is that Lloyd Bridges there in that.
Might be
that picture. I don't think that was Lloyd Bridges.
But the comment says, wouldn't it be unfair to Clemson to have to play Notre Dame that often? ACC wants a team in the playoff hunt, and Notre Dame would keep them out. Well,
I mean, you're
Clemson doesn't
assuming
play
Notre
very-
Dame's going to win all the time,
Right.
But
That's the other thing. And then the other part of it to me is, would Clemson want the strength of schedule, or do they just
it
want to
boosts
go
their
undefeated?
resume. They need somebody better to play. If North
Right.
Carolina's the next best team on your schedule this year,
Right.
they need another big opponent. You're right to boost their strength of schedule.
I would
Absolutely.
think Clemson would be all for it, if I'm being honest. I think they'd be fine with it. I don't think they want to play a bunch of turds all the time. I mean, no good team wants that. How about that? No good team wants that. And Michael has the classic response to not playing Stanford anymore. Stanford and USC games are for recruiting on the West Coast. Notre Dame isn't pulling people from Northern California.
Right.
Okay?
That's what the Stanford part of it, like,
makes no sense.
USC, I get, because it's Los Angeles, it's Southern California. That's where the biggest recruits come from. Northern California, just like being on the West Coast for that.
It's 2022.
I don't think
you can
it does
travel
that
wherever
much
you
for 'em.
want, and random recruits aren't going to Stanford to watch a game.
Right.
They might go to the Coliseum to watch USC and Notre Dame play, but they're not going to Stanford to watch a game. They're not getting away from Silicon Valley. It just that's not where Notre Dame is pulling from. They're just not.
So Vince,
doesn't help me.
Here is the next question. Now, this is a possible college football playoff scenario, and I know you took some notes on this earlier that you left behind. So we'll see. Like, speaking of pop quizzes and all that kind of stuff, we'll see if you passed AP college football playoff. So here's the possible scenario. You've got a currently 2-loss LSU team.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say they beat Georgia in the SEC championship game. So that leaves each with 1 loss. And the loser of Ohio State and Michigan would have 1 loss as well, along with 1 loss Oregon potentially from the Pac-12, assuming they run the table like we were talking about earlier. And then you've got an unbeaten or 1 loss TCU team from the Big 12. So my question is, who's getting in if LSU beats Georgia under all those scenarios? Who's getting into the college football playoff at the end?
All right. So I have a counter question.
Okay.
I need to know if TCU is a 1-loss team or if they're unbeaten, because that makes a big difference to me.
Okay.
If they are, I'll give you both scenarios. If they are unbeaten,
okay,
then obviously they're going to get in. Okay. So they're the Big 12 champion.
An unbeaten Power 5 is not getting left out of the play.
Correct. So whoever is the Big 10 champion is going to be undefeated. So whether that's Ohio State or whether that's Michigan.
Right. One of the two.
They're the number 1 seed. They're in.
Right.
Okay. In this scenario.
Okay. So now we've got, this is unbeaten TCU. So now we've got Ohio State and TCU.
So Ohio State's in. TCU's in at number 2. I'm putting Georgia at number 3 because they were 12-0 going into the championship. I'm assuming that LSU doesn't blow them out. I'm assuming it's a close game.
Okay.
Georgia's in at number 3. Okay. My hard time is the number 4 spot. Okay. Who gets it?
Right.
A 1-loss Pac-12 champion in Oregon, or a 1-loss 11-1 Tennessee. Okay. Now,
so you're still leaving 2-loss LSU out, even if they run the table and win the SEC.
Their losses are too bad. They got blown out by Tennessee, and they got beat by an average Florida State team. They're out. They're out. You're not getting in.
But just to play counter to that now, they would have a win over Alabama and a win over Georgia.
They got 2 losses. They're out. I'm done. They're out.
Okay.
They're done.
Okay.
None of my teams.
Brian Kelly has nothing to do with this.
No, they don't. I'm just looking at a resume.
Okay.
They have 2 losses. I'm putting in 1-loss teams over 2-loss teams. And I don't care that they're the SEC champion. That means nothing to me at this
Obviously.
point. Because they have 2 losses. You have 2 losses, you're out. Okay. So my issue is Tennessee or Oregon. They both lost to Georgia.
Right.
Okay. They both have quality wins on their schedule, right? Tennessee has the Alabama win. They had another really good win that I can't remember off the top of my head. I had it in my notes. Okay. Then Oregon would have wins over USC, Utah, and UCLA. if I'm not mistaken, right? So it's kind of a toss-up. Maybe the tiebreaker is that Oregon got their doors blown off by Georgia and Tennessee lost by less. Maybe that's the tiebreaker. So maybe I put Tennessee in there, and you got two conference champions on the outside looking in.
See, and that's why I asked this question. It's going to be a real conundrum for that committee to decide, because you're going to have Oregon as a Power 5 champion and a Tennessee team that didn't even make the SEC championship game, and we're assuming they win out the rest of the way. But as you said, they've got a lopsided win over LSU, a loss to Georgia, but also a win over Alabama. So like Tennessee and LSU have fairly similar resumes, except Tennessee, of course, has the head-to-head over LSU, and LSU has the loss to Florida State. That's what hurts them the most, right?
And that's what bumps Tennessee over LSU. And then conference champion. See, that there's the other thing. How do they rate being a conference champion? Because maybe that's the tick that puts Oregon in over Tennessee.
Right. That's like the extra data point is the conference championship. So then let's take TCU out. TCU's got at least a loss, so they're no longer undefeated. How does that change your top? Again, I don't disagree with the most part, but I think you're right. The biggest question is going to come down to, in the first scenario, Tennessee or Oregon, I think, sitting there with the one loss.
All right.
But
so
now,
what's your question?
So now TCU has one loss.
Okay. Yeah.
Everything else is the same, but TCU has one loss.
So if TCU has a loss, they're out. They're out. They're done. And that alleviates my problem, because now it's Ohio State, it's Georgia, it's Oregon, and it's Tennessee. Those are the four. So if TCU ends up losing, they're done. They're out of the top four.
Right. See, and here's what complicates things as well. Like Brent says, what actually hurts Oregon is they do have a head-to-head with Georgia where they got their doors blown off.
Yeah.
They lost 49-3 to Georgia. And in the meantime, again, in this scenario, you've got head-to-heads, obviously, with all these SEC teams, including the two-loss LSU team. I think LSU is going to get in with two losses. I think if they run the table the rest of the way, they beat Georgia, I think they're going to become the first two-loss team to get in.
Over who?
So let's go over Tennessee, probably. I think they'll keep Georgia in, and Tennessee would be the odd team out in that scenario.
So Georgia, LSU, Ohio State, and TCU would be in. Or is this the one-loss TCU scenario?
This is if TCU is undefeated. If TCU has a loss, that's where I think it even gets tougher because of the LSU entanglement in this whole thing. I think it's going to be Ohio State. It's going to be Georgia. It's going to be LSU. And you probably do get Oregon in that situation, because you're not going to have three SEC teams.
No
but
way.
I do think that I think they'll put LSU in if they run the table, because, again, they would have a win over Alabama, the loss to Tennessee, but they would also have a more recent win over Georgia. I think they'll put LSU in with two losses.
So where is a one-loss conference champion Clemson fall into any of this?
I don't think they have a chance, because Notre Dame beating both Clemson and North Carolina handily, one of those on the road, those are probably going to be the two teams that play in the ACC championship game.
I agree.
I don't think Clemson has a shot in all this.
All right.
Because they need more three-loss team.
They need more chaos in order to be in the conversation. I agree with that completely.
Yeah.
So that means, by the way, that Clemson would be in the Orange Bowl as the ACC representative.
Right.
And you would have an opportunity for Notre Dame to play against them again.
Right.
Just saying.
Tyler with a super chat. Do you love how the media and ESPN love Brian Kelly now after getting Bama in his first year at LSU?
They loved him when he left Notre Dame. How quick we forget about what a great move it was for Brian Kelly to leave Notre Dame and go to the SEC, because now you don't have the academic restrictions and he's going to go win a national championship and all these different things. They never didn't love him. Let's be real clear on that.
Right. They doubted it a little bit, the way they lost to Florida State to start the season, and it was just tenuous enough at times early on that it's like, oh, which way is this going to go? I'm amazed. You do have to give the guy credit, because we were sitting here looking at that schedule
We're like
early
6-6 at best.
You could easily have seen a 6-6
Yes.
season, and instead
And
they're in
Texas
college
A&M
football
has
playoff
disappointed
contention.
us. Arkansas has disappointed us. I mean, Florida has disappointed us. Like
Yep.
all these teams that I need, Alabama has disappointed me. Like all these teams I needed to humble Brian Kelly have just not shown up this year, and it's extremely disappointing.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
Extremely.
I'm trying to think.
I still
who
got
they
my
even
money on
playing this
Arkansas
week,
this week. Arkansas. They
Is it
play
Arkansas?
Come on, Hogs. Come on.
Call the Hogs, baby.
It would
Call the
be-
Hogs.
Tell me it would not be typical Brian Kelly to beat Alabama and the next week then lose to like a 500 Arkansas team.
I know.
That would be great.
Fill in the blank, Vince. Indianapolis Colts owner Jim Irsay is blank.
Bat-S crazy. I mean, I don't know how else to say it. That man is unbelievable when it comes to making moves. He's nuts. He's absolutely bonkers. He's certifiable. How about that? Certifiable.
He is only 63 years old. Like, I look at
looks like
him.
he's 97.
I thought he was a lot older than 63. And he's got that red face. His face, his head looks like it's going to explode. And he is just, this classic now son of a rich guy who became the rich guy.
Yeah.
With all of his crazy eccentric hobbies and all this different stuff and all his, collecting his guitars and everything and his snakeskin boots and whatever else. And he's just become, he's already got one Super Bowl for one thing.
Somehow.
But he's definitely he's grab bagging now is what he is doing. Like making this Jeff Saturday move, and everyone's got good things to say about Jeff Saturday.
He's a good guy. He's great.
He comes across as a great guy. But it's just amazing. Like when you look at, and they were talking about him on NFL Network the other day, when you look at the guys on that Colts staff, they've all got like 20 plus years of experience. And instead of, typically what happens if you fire the head coach, you make someone from within the interim because he's there. He's familiar with guys. You're halfway through the season. You make them the interim coach. You don't go outside the organization to get a guy who hasn't even coached outside of high school football.
Right.
Who's whether he's one of the greats from your team or not. It's just amazing that they, that he went this route. And I just can't imagine like being in that situation, like if you're either Jeff Saturday or the guys on that staff. And it just shows how bonkers Jim Irsay is to make a move like this and think that he's the completely sane one,
I know, right? And Jeff Saturday was like, I don't know why he called me, but hey, let's go. Like it was hilarious to hear some of his comments about the whole thing.
Yeah. So we were just talking about, we'll go back to the college football playoff talk. Nick says he's got a super chat. If Michigan and Ohio State game is close, you don't see both in.
Not even.
I could see it if Ohio State loses, maybe. But again, I think you've got a better chance of getting two SEC than two Big Ten. But if Ohio State wins and it's Michigan that loses, their strength of schedule just is not good enough to get them in.
Nailed it.
Again, maybe Ohio State, but even then, their strength of schedule. But again, like that's where having Notre Dame in the top 25 bolsters their argument and all that kind of stuff.
Michigan's strength of schedule right now is 73rd in the country. Ohio State is 53rd. Those are not the numbers of teams that are going to get into the college football playoff with a loss. I'm sorry. This is very similar to me with like the Big 12. As soon as you get a loss in the Big 12, you're out, right? You got to be undefeated to get in, period. Right.
Yeah.
And if Ohio, let's say Ohio State wins and then they go, or let's say Michigan wins and then they go to the championship and they lose. So now you got both teams with one loss. I think they're both out. I don't think there's a Big Ten representative.
Yeah. I could see that. Yeah, I agree. Brent Smith says when Jim Irsay goes to Pebble Beach, he tips the staff $50,000 per stay.
Dang.
Yes, $50K. That is amazing. Well, I mean, at least he's a nice tipper. He's a good guy. I waited on
that's great.
a Kansas football coach once when I worked at a bar when I was in school, Glenn Mason at the time, who I think is he still with the Big Ten Network now? He was at Minnesota for a while, but He was cheap. He was cheap. His whole family came in. Basically, they gave me his table because I was supposed to be, like the guy who could,
Work it.
handle, that table and all that kind of stuff. And, I got like maybe a $5 tip, with like 10 people sitting at the table.
There's
So,
a current Notre Dame head coach that's not a very good tipper. I'll say that.
current Notre Dame head coach.
Mm-hmm. And there's a bunch of sports at Notre Dame, so I'm not going to get any more.
Oh. So
specific.
different sport, but gotcha.
Yeah, there's a bunch of coaches. I'm not saying the football coach.
All
I'm
right.
saying a bunch of coaches.
Okay.
Yes.
I'm glad you specified that, but you're going to have to tell me who it is after the show.
I will.
All right, last question tonight. Parade magazine, which has been a fixture in American newspapers since 1941, will no longer show up in your Sunday newspaper after this Sunday. It's going to be the last time Parade is published. You can still find it online. Have you now, or have you ever been a Parade magazine reader, Vince?
I have read Parade magazine, actually. I believe every year they're the ones that put out like what people make, like the money that they make and stuff like that, right?
Right.
I've read that article many, many times.
Yeah.
So I have read Parade magazine.
We're both gluttons. We like to read how much, how much more people make than us.
How much we're not making. That's exactly right.
That's right. That's like, I remember when I was a kid, when I would like stay at my grandparents on the weekend where we lived, we didn't get the Parade, but like their newspaper did get the Parade, so you would see it. And you remember like the Parade All-Americans, they used to do the Parade All-American basketball team. Yeah. And I think that's where I got started because, like when I was a kid, I basically read the comics. I read the sports section.
Yep.
And then when I went to my grandparents, I would get the Parade magazine, and that's where I saw it, like before the internet and Twitter, when all these different, like celebrity things were out there, it's like they would have the questions, like who's doing what show, like what's coming up next for MASH, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And Cheers. And you would get, like the little things in there. So yeah, I always have over the years. It's like a nice little, kind of surprise, that you got, but it's not going to be in the paper anymore.
That's disappointing, but it's a sign of the times. I mean,
it is.
It
is. Yeah, Michael says he was a Washington Post paper boy in the 80s. So I wasn't Washington Post. I was Manhattan Mercury in Manhattan, Kansas paper boy for a while.
Nice. We get a copy of the South End Tribune every day.
Do you?
Yeah, we do.
We switched to weekends, and it's,
I don't read it, but
there's
we
just
have
so much less. I know. It's just like,
and the problem is once the news is in the newspaper, it's old news.
Right.
That's part of the problem.
And
it used to be a staple for me. I'm going to go off on a tangent and I apologize, but when I was coaching high school football, it was a staple on Saturday morning before I would go meet with the other coaches to go through the scores and go through all the stories about all the high school games that went on. Now those aren't even out till Sunday.
I know.
Because of the way that the deadlines and all those things work.
Yeah, because like their deadlines have become earlier because they've outsourced it out of town to where they print it. So they've got to, have earlier deadlines to get it in. But you're absolutely right. Like the high school stuff on Friday night doesn't come out till Sunday.
Brutal.
And your Notre Dame stuff on Saturday, even if it's an early game, I don't even think you see it until Monday.
No.
So
that's brutal. And that's what I used to love to do. You read the high school stuff Saturday morning, you read the Notre Dame stuff on Sunday.
Yep.
Now it's old news. It's just, there's nothing that you can tell me that don't already know. And that's part of the problem with newspapers the way they are now and the way things are.
It's sad.
Because I love reading the newspaper. Yeah.
Like paper, like you read the paper and you got the ink on your fingers and all that kind of stuff. And one of those things that's slowly dying.
I know.
Like everything else.
Sounded like an old man on that one. Like everything
back
else.
In my day. All right. Well, that's going to do it. I won't be here tomorrow. Vince won't either. I believe Brian and Jesse will have you tomorrow night. I think Jesse's bringing the whiteboard back to do a little Navy diagramming. They're going to get into some keys to the triple option tomorrow night.
Jesse played in the triple option.
He did. I was telling Brian, when Jesse played against the triple option, those were like his money games in terms of tackles. He would come out of those with like 18, 20 tackles a game in those 3 years that he played against that.
He was born to be a middle linebacker, that boy. I'll tell you what.
That's right.
Loved it.
That's right. Yep. As Chi-Town said, Professor Jesse Stiers.
That's right. That's right.
All right. Well, great stuff as always. Good to have everybody with us. Great questions tonight. And yes, tomorrow night is whiteboard time. Vince, I will talk to you later. I'll be in St. Louis this weekend. So the plan is I'll be joining you from St. Louis Saturday morning for Countdown. So
Beautiful. Yes. And it's early morning, at same time for us, 10 to noon, but we'll be more like 10 to 11:30 because of the game happening at noon. So yeah.
That's right. All right. We will talk to you later then. IB Nation Sports Talk.